The balding moth still prefers to hide in the Kremlin's closet. On the eve of the third round of negotiations in Istanbul, Putin's team came up with a new absurd reason why a meeting with Zelensky is impossible. China miscalculated. Trump's team issued a stern warning to Beijing against further supporting Russia. In small groups and on foot, we'll tell you how the Russians are trying to break through to Pokrovsk and how it ends for them. Up to 100 eliminated. The GUR showed how they destroyed the enemy in Donbass using ground robots. You'll see fiery footage very soon. All this and more coming up in our broadcast. In the meantime, please like and subscribe to the Ukraine channel. Today is going to be interesting. A meeting between the Russian dictator and the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, is impossible, since Ukraine has a ban on negotiations with Putin. The Kremlin is not hoping for any kind of breakthrough in negotiations with Ukraine. This statement was made by the press secretary of the head of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Peskov. He also stated that Moscow first needs to discuss with Kyiv the draft memorandums that both sides presented during the negotiations in Istanbul. According to Peskov, Russia intends to secure its interests and accomplish the objectives it set from the very beginning. And yet, a third round of negotiations between Ukraine and Russia will take place. It is scheduled to be held today in Istanbul. The preparations for the meeting have been confirmed in Moscow, and the Ukrainian delegation is headed by the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Rustem Umerov. What should we expect from the new round in Istanbul, and what provocation is the Russian side preparing? In a minute, you'll find out about this, as well as about the renewed outcry of Putin's propagandists in the swamps. The Kremlin's attack dogs are in a frenzy after the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, was presented with Ukrainian armed forces patches. More on this and other important events around the world in our international review.
The standoff between Azerbaijan and Russia continues. President Aliyev accepted the Ukrainian armed forces patches as a gift and called for their continued use. To continue using them. In addition, Aliyev advised Ukrainians not to agree to the occupation of their territories.
And I think this resonates with the aspirations of the Ukrainian people to never accept occupation. That is the main advice. That is what we did.
But the Russian Federation is ready to simply shoot even at its own partners. And we now remember that Russian propagandists are openly calling for an invasion of the sovereign state of Azerbaijan. They call Baku a Russian city, drawing parallels with Odessa. And there are many, many other steps being taken to supposedly show Aliyev his place. But Aliyev is acting from a position of strength.
Putin's position is weakening not only in Azerbaijan. It seems that the friendship with Trump has gone down the drain. Senator Lindsey Graham stated that Trump is going to kick Putin's ass.
Putin, your turn is coming. Donald Trump is the Scotty Scheffler of American politics and foreign diplomacy, and he's about to kick your ass. Trump is planning to impose tariffs on those who buy Russian oil: China, India, and Brazil. These three prominent countries collectively purchase approximately 80% of the readily available, cheap Russian oil, and in doing so continue to keep the Russian war machine actively running.
A new round of negotiations will take place in Istanbul. The end of the war, it seems, is no longer being discussed. The plan is to agree on another prisoner exchange.
It was agreed that at the third meeting, the parties would exchange written their analyses of the documents they received. From the Russian side, it was a draft memorandum. From our side, the negotiation framework. So, accordingly, as I understand it, the parties can hand over these documents, but there definitely won't be any heated discussions.
The Vatican is also eager to help actively with humanitarian issues. Pope Leo XIV is planning to resume dialogue with the Russian Orthodox Church and Patriarch Kirill. Previously, he had already spoken with Putin.
The current talk about intensifying relations with the Russian Orthodox Church is an opportunity to establish contact, in particular to work on the humanitarian track. For example, consider the significant release of 400 Ukrainian children, a comprehensive list of whom President Zelensky personally handed over to Pope Francis XIV several months ago, a truly hopeful development.
The new Pope called the war a true imperialist invasion and stated that Russian troops are committing crimes against humanity in Ukraine.
These days, my thoughts often turn to the Ukrainian people, who have been subjected to new, serious attacks on civilians and infrastructure. I pray for all the innocent victims, especially for the children and families. Once again, I strongly urge that the war be stopped and that initiatives for dialogue and peace be supported.
The 29th meeting in the Ramstein format has taken place, at which Ukraine's Minister of Defense Shmyhal stated that an additional $6 billion is needed this year to close the gap in weapons procurement.
Russian terror continues, which is why we need to strengthen our air defense. I am asking the United States to provide these weapons for procurement and our European partners to provide the necessary funding for their purchase.
German Defense Minister Pistorius announced the delivery of 5 Patriot systems to Ukraine, the very ones of which Trump had promised 17.
Germany will provide additional air defense systems and much-needed ammunition. Germany will contribute to the delivery of 5 urgently needed Patriot systems as soon as possible.
5,000 systems?
There are no discrepancies. Obviously, we are still talking about 17 launches, which can constitute exactly 5 Patriot batteries. And since a Patriot battery consists of 4 to 8 launches.
In addition, the United Kingdom and Germany will provide 220,000 shells for Gepard anti-aircraft systems, as well as funding for UAVs.
As for air defense, we have agreed on a partnership to supply critically important air defense missiles to Ukraine. And finally, as part of NATO's comprehensive aid package, the United Kingdom will allocate another £40 million.
It seems that things are getting worse and worse for Putin. Even those who had previously remained neutral are now starting to take action against Russia from all sides.
China must stop subsidizing the war in Ukraine by supporting the Russian regime and Russian military efforts. Otherwise, it will face sanctions from US President Donald Trump in the form of secondary tariffs. This was stated by US Ambassador to NATO Matthew Whitaker, according to Bloomberg. Whitaker reminded that the White House will impose secondary tariffs on all countries that purchase Russian energy resources if Moscow does not agree to a peace deal within a few weeks. I believe that China has miscalculated. I think they should be reproached for subsidizing these killings that are taking place on the battlefields in Ukraine, the ambassador noted. The Russians have entered Pokrovsk. This is exactly what Russian Z channels are loudly proclaiming. Is this really the case, and how the occupiers, sparing no infantry, are trying to gain a foothold at the administrative border of Dnipropetrovsk region? We'll show you in just a minute. Up to 100 eliminated. The GUR has shown how they destroy the enemy in Donbass using ground robots. Spectacular footage is also coming up very soon. And more remarkable drones flew into the Samara region and attacked the Novokuybishevsk petrochemical company. This is a strategically important facility for Putin's Russia. All the details are in our military review.
35 downed Ukrainian drones, that's the result published by the Russian Ministry of Defense. Meanwhile, Russian public pages and propaganda media are publishing the results of strikes on Russian military facilities. In this footage, drones flew into the Samara region and attacked the Novokuybishevsk petrochemical company. The plant produces raw materials for explosives used in shells, aerial bombs, and other munitions. It is also the only producer in Russia of synthetic ethyl alcohol and paradate butylphenol, a unique component for resins, plasticizers, and antioxidants that has no analogs either in Russia or in the post-Soviet space, according to media reports. More than 10 explosions were reported in Rostov. While military targets in Russia are currently being eliminated by drones from the air, on the front lines, Ukrainian defenders are taking out the enemy with the help of ground robots.
Today, indeed, we can say that if, for example, drones now dominate the low airspace, they create dead zones where neither personnel nor military equipment can move everything that is maximally destroyed. Accordingly, we are saying that today robotic systems can also conduct combat operations, and such combat operations are already taking place on the battlefield.
Ukrainian scouts report the elimination of nearly 100 occupiers using ground drones in the Toretsk and Pokrovsk directions. In the latter area, there are reports of the presence of Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups.
We are saying that the enemy is indeed attempting to infiltrate the urban agglomeration using sabotage and reconnaissance groups. And we are also saying that these sabotage and reconnaissance groups are quite likely aiming to try to disrupt our logistics or defensive logistics in order to cut them off as much as possible and complicate the tasks our troops are carrying out in Pokrovsk to defend this key defensive stronghold.
The enemy has focused on trying to demonstrate at least some presence in the Dnipropetrovsk region, or at the very least along the administrative borders in the Novopavlivka direction. According to Ukrainian military personnel, the Russians need this so that the statements made by Russian propaganda, which have been circulating for almost a month now, have at least some minimal factual basis.
Any advance by Russian troops is amplified. Any movement by Russian forces is scaled up to such an extent that this information is not only intended for domestic audiences, although obviously victories are needed, and if they don't exist, they have to be fabricated. But clearly, this is also an attempt to exert psychological pressure both on Ukraine's defense forces and accordingly on our people.
Ukraine and Denmark are jointly developing a drone interceptor powered by artificial intelligence. The system can automatically detect, track and destroy various types of enemy UAVs, from commercial Mavics to reconnaissance and strike Shaheds. Other countries that see Russia as a threat are also taking care of their own defense. The United Kingdom, together with Japan and Italy, is working on the creation of a new flagship 6th-generation fighter jet, which, in the event of a war between Russia and NATO, would be able to reach military targets on Russian territory undetected by air defense systems without refueling and strike them. This was reported by The Telegraph.
For the first time in 17 years, nuclear bombs have been deployed in Britain. The United States has delivered the most advanced version of bombs, which are the main nuclear weapons of the US strategic forces, to its largest European airbase. This is the Lakenheath base in the United Kingdom, which has thus become the 6th country in Europe where American nuclear weapons are deployed. Our journalist will explain why this has happened right now.
For the first time in 17 years, Washington has brought weapons of mass destruction to Britain. The United States has delivered the most advanced version of bombs, which are the main nuclear weapons of America's strategic forces, to its largest European airbase. However, neither the American nor the British authorities have commented in any way on the alleged deployment of these weapons.
The first information about the possible return of nuclear weapons to the territory of the United Kingdom dates back to 2022. At that time, Western media reported that the United States was carrying out reconstruction of this facility, which had been effectively mothballed in 2008, and accordingly, the actions of the United States should be seen as a gradual return to the tactics of nuclear deterrence, which was one of the defining features of the NATO bloc. This also applies to the foreign policy course of the United Kingdom.
As reported by British publications, last week B-61-12 thermonuclear bombs were delivered to a newly built secure storage facility at the Lakenheath Air Base in eastern England. Thus, the United Kingdom has become the 6th country in Europe to host US nuclear weapons.
In March, Polish President Andrzej Duda called on the United States to deploy nuclear capabilities on Polish territory as a possible preventive measure to deter an armed invasion by the Russian Federation from the territory of the Republic of Belarus. In addition, on the 5th of March, French President Emmanuel Macron stated that his country is ready to deploy its nuclear capabilities on the territory of a number of European countries.
The B-61-12 G-gravity bombs have a yield of up to 50 kilotons, which is more than 3 times the power of the atomic weapon dropped on Hiroshima in 1945. Simply put, it's 4 bombs in one.
This weapon is considered one of the most versatile in the United States nuclear arsenal. Its development began back in the 1960s, and since then there have been 12 modifications. It should be noted that the B-61-12H has 4 possible yield settings, which is quite remarkable, ranging from 0.3 to 50 kilotons. Accordingly, the development of the latest modification, the B-61-12, began in 2008.
American nuclear weapons had already been deployed at the Lakenheath base in the UK during the Cold War, but they were completely removed from there in 2008 as part of arms reductions in Europe. The likely return of nuclear weapons is part of a program to develop and modernize nuclear facilities in response to heightened tensions with the Kremlin following Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Back in March 2025, Trump called on the Russian Federation and China to pursue nuclear disarmament. So but he did not receive any corresponding political signal either from the Russian Federation or accordingly from China. And against the backdrop of recent statements by the political leadership of the Russian Federation about the possibility of a nuclear strike on the territory of the United Kingdom, the return of the nuclear arsenal to this country serves as a warning to the Russian Federation and makes it clear that the United States is prepared to respond appropriately to nuclear threats from the Russian Federation.
Earlier, Russia had already stated that the deployment of American weapons in the United Kingdom would be regarded by Moscow as an escalation and would be met with compensatory countermeasures.
Currently, 5 nuclear facilities are being modernized on the territory of the Russian Federation itself. And this indicates that the Russian Federation is sending a political signal to the United States that it has in fact effectively denounced the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. There are 11 nuclear facilities located on the territory of the Russian Federation, but problems with the Russian budget, specifically the lack of funds, currently allow for the reconstruction of only 5 facilities. Moreover, according to the Russian side's own assessment, this will once again turn into a long-term construction project and yet another set of corruption monuments for the Russian Ministry of Defense.
On the 24th of June, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom announced plans to purchase F-35A fighter jets from the United States, which are capable of carrying B-61 to 12 nuclear bombs. This purchase represents the largest strengthening of the United Kingdom's nuclear capability in a generation.
Even Russian war correspondents are now writing about the water catastrophe in the occupied Donbass and are spreading appeals from local residents to Putin. Notably, in these appeals, locals state directly that the problem lies in the corruption and negligence of the occupation administration, specifically in the failure to build the promised water pipeline. They describe the current situation as an outrage.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Meanwhile, Putin's associates continue to siphon off funds from the state budget that were allocated specifically for projects in the occupied territories. Cyber investigators have compiled and published a list of secret companies registered to fake individuals but actually owned by Putin's friends and cronies. Details are in our report.
Ukrainian cyber activists continue to bring Kremlin secrets to light. The 256 cyber assault group intercepted correspondence between Russian agencies and uncovered a large-scale scheme for embezzling billions from the budget in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. The data has already been analyzed by the international intelligence group informed Napalm.
Russia is trying to legalize money laundering and looting in the occupied territories, turning war crimes into a profitable business.
So, after the full-scale invasion in 2022, Russia faced administrative chaos and fear of sanctions. The occupied territories were not integrated into the Russian system, and big business was afraid of sanctions and was in no hurry to enter these territories directly. And then they found a solution in the old Crimean scenario where pumping in money, efficient reconstruction, propaganda, and guarantees of anonymity create the illusion of development. And to make it easier to divvy up the honestly stolen funds, the Russian Ministry of Construction created a special department for implementing a special infrastructure project back in May 2022. According to leaked information, a total of 6 Russian ministries are involved in the scheme.
The Ministry of Construction established a department for implementing a special infrastructure project, which will be responsible for the restoration of the liberated territories of the DPR and LPR. The Russian authorities have not yet disclosed the costs of this work.
What does this mean in practice? The Kremlin allocates money from the budget and transfers it to selected companies through classified contracts. These companies then create fake subcontractor firms, siphon off the funds, and in reality build just enough to shoot a cheap propaganda segment.
We don't allow anyone to steal, neither on a large scale nor in small amounts.
In intercepted lists from 2022 and 2024, there are 194 Russian companies that were allowed to work in the temporarily occupied territories.
The government of the Russian Federation reports that based on the review of applications from organizations seeking to participate in the restoration and construction of facilities as part of the implementation of the special infrastructure project. The relevant inspections were carried out, and as a result, no factors were identified that would prevent these organizations from being involved in the restoration and construction of facilities under the sea.
Among the participants are both little-known shell companies and major players such as Rostelecom, Virginia T. Aftodor Engineering, and Arstroy. The latter, for example, does not officially publicize its involvement in work on the occupied territories, although journalists have already linked it to a project in the devastated Mariupol. The scheme is simple. A company receives a contract, uses part of the funds, and then passes the work on to someone else. For example, SK Sirius, which is registered in Crimea. Just a year after starting operations, the company goes into liquidation. As for the workers, most of them are brought in from Russia, while the local economy gets only scraps from this arrangement. Next, the holy of holies of the Russian Federation comes into play: propaganda. Its main goal is to do everything possible to present a beautiful picture of successful restoration. Another company is Miranda Media, which since 2014 has been providing communications in the occupied territories, including Crimea and Donbass. Despite its key role in legitimizing the occupation, it only came under EU sanctions at the end of 2023. Its subsidiary, Mir Telecom, continued to operate without restrictions for quite some time, but was later also banned. This entire special project is not about construction, but about turning war into business. So far, sanctions have only affected a small part of the system. Most of the companies on the list still operate openly, have assets in Russia, and maintain partners abroad. Targeting them could not only stop the financing of the war, but also break up corruption chains. However, the Kremlin successfully hides the beneficiaries behind a network of subcontractors whose reputations are still clean.
The State Duma has passed an amendment in its final reading introducing fines for searching extremist materials on the internet. The State Duma has also passed a law recognizing the use of VPNs as an aggravating circumstance. Well, it seems the hunters of enemies of the people have yet another reason to celebrate, and it looks like all residents of the Russian Federation will be informing on each other and ending up behind bars. It seems they're also trying to catch up with those who managed to leave and condemn this entire theater of the absurd. The Presidensky District Court of Moscow has granted the investigators' request for the arrest in absentia of television host Atana Lazarva in a criminal case concerning her alleged evasion of obligations as a foreign agent. More details about Lazareva's background and the persecution she faces from the Putin regime are in our next segment. While watching, don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel Ukraine Today.
A court in Moscow has arrested television host Atana Lazarva in absentia on charges of evading the obligations of a foreign agent.
Then all these new labels started piling up. First terrorist, then extremist, then a criminal case, then being put on a wanted list, then an international wanted list. And it's like, well, before that there was also the foreign agent status, and you kind of get used to it too. At this very moment, of course, I feel an overwhelming sense of bitterness, a profound and deep sadness. Because it truly feels as though the symbolic motherland, the very essence of our nation, is once again unjustly cursing you, condemning you without cause.
Last year, Lazareva was already sentenced in absentia to 6.5 years in a penal colony under the article on justifying terrorism.
Literally every day now we come across news of drone attacks on Russian cities, right? And honestly, every time, my first thought is what happened here. If we're talking about feelings, and it's terrible, but I feel glad. The whole society, it's a disaster. We need to just level all of Russia to the ground and build a new Russia.
After Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Lazareva left the country and condemned the war.
Everyone around the world knows that Russia always has something there, is fulfilling its international duty. Or, like in Czechoslovakia, they had some name for it too, right? It's always about defense or defending against fascists, or Russia has some special operation to liberate someone. We're not waging war, at least. That's what we told ourselves. And we all bought into it, All of it. Oh, Afghanistan. Well, maybe it's necessary. You probably know better. Oh, Armenia, Nagorno-Karabakh, Azerbaijan, Georgia, well, probably. We did all this with our own hands.
For many years, the television host has openly criticized the Russian authorities and Putin, attended opposition rallies, spoken out in support of LGBT rights, and against the annexation of Crimea.
If you've come here, it means you already have a head on your shoulders, not a cabbage. Well, yes, of course. Of course, I always support the toast, may he die, which we have in our circle. Well, in this sense, he's an old man who clings on with his old claw-like hands. It's just an image. Listen, I'm sure he actually has a great manicure and so on, but he doesn't let anything new move forward. He thinks that all of this is really forbidden, that it doesn't belong in his world.
Moreover, Lazareva is one of those who believes that all Russians are responsible for the war, not just Putin, and that this outcome was caused by the moral and material impoverishment within the country.
The fact that we saw those photos from Bucha and Irpin, and that in Irpin, all the apartments were looted, those that were empty, and even those with the residents, all of them. Everything that could possibly be taken was looted. It's not because we're punishing you. No, it's poverty. How can this country with its impoverished people claim to wage war, say, against America, as they're trying to present it to us? I don't understand, because there are no resources, no reserves, and people have no strength, neither physical nor moral. And I really don't understand what it's even for.
For this, the television host is hated with a burning hatred by her former colleagues who sold out to the Kremlin for money.
The vulgarity of these people is off the charts. Did you forget what you used to say on Ukrainian television broadcasts when your country? Although, on the other hand, what country is yours, Tanya? Foreign agent status? Never. Imprison her? Imprisonment is for enemies. And yet, Tanya truly betrayed her country. She appeared on propagandist Ukrainian Nazi channels, insulting the motherland and the heroes fighting against Nazism.
The Russian army left the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, stealing spoons and forks. At last, the world's second army no longer eats with its hands. Sergei Shoigu announced the successful completion of the first phase of the special operation. Since all the objectives, namely the reduction of Russian troops, have been achieved.
But Lazareva, unlike many of her compatriots, openly states that sooner or later she will return to Russia.
This is my country after all. Honestly, I would go back there right now with pleasure if I weren't facing, 6 years, 7 years in prison, if I didn't know that I'd be arrested right at the airport. I never planned to leave in the first place. I was fighting the regime there as best I could. And even though people accuse me and I accuse myself too of not having done enough, at least I did something. I resisted.
Of course, that's if there's even anywhere to return to. Because judging by the speed at which Putin's regime is destroying the country from within, this empire will collapse very soon.